Industrial relations is the relationship that exists between employers and employees. Good industrial relations means employees' morale is increased and their commitment to the business is strengthened. Employee productivity increases, less absenteeism and employee turnover, which people leaving and coming from the job. Employee empowerment and involvement. Good reputation for the business and less strikes. What could be the possible reasons for bad industrial relations? Well, the number one cause is pay. Underpaid in relation to cost of living, similar occupations, and increased workload. And your work's going up and your pay is not. Working conditions, really poor working conditions. Right now, COVID has brought around this to be a major reason for people having bad industrial relations. People don't feel safe in the workplace. The breaks aren't good enough. Like yourselves here looking for, your mask breaks, very important. And this also arises in workplaces. So good working conditions you need. And discrimination. People being discriminated in the jobs. This causes bad working conditions. Redundancies. Right now we can see with the Debenhams workers, the redundancies, usually bad industrial relations, 6 months strike, they're not letting the Debenhams in to get their stock because they're not paying a fair redundancy wage. So this causes huge industrial relations problems. Promotions. Unfair promotion. Somebody gets promoted over you, you're there longer, you put in the work, you have the qualification, and you feel that there's an unfair system around promotions. This can cause bad industrial relations. Poor management decisions or policies, where management are making decisions without consultations or input of employees. They don't have the best feel for the place. Employees have a better feel for the place because they're there every day. So really poor management decisions that affect the workers can cause bad industrial relations. Different types of pay claims. Comparability claims. Other employees doing similar work get a pay rise. Relativity claim. Pay is related to other employees in different jobs, example TDs in civil service, or teachers, as nurses got a pay rise. So we're similar with civil servants, we want a pay rise. If the Lewis drivers got a pay increase, you might see bus airline workers saying, well, we want a pay rise. So it's a relativity. People in different jobs, but relative similar to your own, and you want a relativity claim. Whereas comparability claims, other employees doing similar work get a pay rise. Productivity claim, you're making more, you're producing more, and you want compensation for that. And compensation for having to work harder or cope with change. So you want a pay increase. Cost of living claim. Employees can't afford to live on the wages that they get, and we can see that as a big one now with the cost of rents in society and cost of living. People need pay increases to match the costs of rent in society. Rents are coming down now since COVID, but the prices of them are 2000, so they're not coming down fast enough. So, and they never went up to match the rents. So cost of living claims, and people can't afford to live on the wages. Types of industrial action. There's official strike. This is where the employees are told to stop working by the union. This is legal. You've got the go ahead. Unofficial strike. This is where employees strike without the backing of the union. Things got so tense, and this is illegal. So you should always seek the backing of your union for it to be an official strike. Work to rule. Workers refuse to do any work that is not specified in their employment contract. So basically, like for a teacher, for example, we're at the moment in consultation with the government, we're being balloted for industrial action. That doesn't necessarily mean strike. What we might decide to do is not do corridor duty, not ring parents, just teach, do nothing else, don't do any disciplinary. We might decide actually not to do our supervision and substitution. If some teachers have been helping out and it wasn't in their contract. So stuff like that makes it impossible. Anything outside the contract, not take phone calls, not take sick notes, and not do tutor, because tutor is a bit of a voluntary role actually, so you could decide not to be a tutor, and you'd see the schools struggle. Overtime ban. Workers refuse to work overtime. So that in a lot of factories could have a huge detrimental effect, especially if it's coming up to Christmas and they need to meet orders, and basically the prices that they're getting from their customers that they're selling to is linked on it being on time. So an overtime ban could put a company under huge pressures to meet the workers' demands. Trade unions. A trade union is an interest group that promotes its members' interests. The largest trade union in the country is SIPDU. So they represent Service and Industrial Professional Trade Union. So it's the biggest in Ireland. Employees pay an annual fee to the members of a trade union called a subscription. The employees elect a fellow member as their shop steward to represent them at union meetings, recruit new members, and represent them in negotiations with management. So that's the role of a shop steward. They're the link between management, employees, and the union. A function of a trade union. A trade union is to fight for proper pay and working conditions for its members. The union, that's the number one core function of a union, and it's as good as its members. And solidarity, and workers should not be divided. They should fight for pay and working conditions. In Ireland now, we have a huge level of unequal pay amongst civil service, and it's a huge battle for trade unions at the moment. Disputes. The union will represent the workers in a dispute with management. So you might run into an individual problem with your management. You might feel harassed, you might feel bullied, you might feel discriminated against. And this is where you can call your union in to go into negotiations with your management, and that it shouldn't fall on your shoulders, that you're doing your job, but you feel harassed, or you feel like you've been the workload has gotten bigger without discussion. There's been changes to your work practices and you individually, and you're not happy with it. So they can go in on an individual basis and fight on your behalf. National pay agreements. The union will represent employees in agreements involving social partners. So the government have often come to unions and organised national pay agreements to say minimise strikes. So we have national pay agreements here in Ireland, and many feel that the union should step away from this, that they work too closely with governments and forgot that their role is to represent the members. And now, like the national pay agreements that we see, sometimes they say, oh, you'll only get so many increases, and that's just it. But the cost of living will increase rapidly. Well, then you're probably locked into this national pay agreement that doesn't meet the needs of the workers and the members, and they're going, oh, you signed up to the pay agreement. So a lot of members of trade union feels that we should, that these national pay agreements can actually hinder our fight. And also then its number one function is to protect its members' interests, and that comes around back to what I said at the beginning at the top of that slide, pay and working conditions. That's how you, number one, protect your workers. Irish Congress of Trade Unions. This is an interest group representing almost all trade unions. It's the umbrella of all trade unions. It negotiates on behalf of Irish workers at the government-held national pay agreement, so it goes in there on behalf of us. And that's what I was saying earlier. A lot of individual unions feel that the Irish Congress of Trade Unions is a bit removed from its membership. It gives permission for all-out strikes, a general strike, one of which we haven't had in years. But like, if you've seen that the situations under COVID got really, really dangerous, the Irish Congress of Trade Union has permission to call an all-out strike on behalf of its members. And should do. At the moment, there's Debenhams workers striking to make sure that the workers, when made redundant, when companies wind up and close down, that workers are paid first before any other debtors the business owes out. And the Irish Congress of Trade Unions should get really, really behind them. They've appealed to them this week to get behind them, to give them more support, to give their union mandate more support. So it'll be interesting to see that unfold. You should probably research a bit on that. You'll probably find it on the Debenhams Facebook page, their call out to the Irish Congress of Trade Unions. So it also settles disputes between unions. Over the last couple of years, there's two teachers' unions in secondary school, ASTI and TUI. And the ASTI fought long and hard to stop the unequal pay, and they went out to strike by themselves. The government implemented penalties on just one union. They said, well, you can't get a permanent job after 2 years. They froze their wages. And because this was happening, TUI undermined them and took their membership. Come to us and you can get a permanency. But it was undermining the fight for equal pay. And you're not allowed to take new members during industrial action. So the Irish Congress of Trade Union had to settle this dispute and did say that basically the TUI had broken the rules of trade union solidarity. And so now TUI is liable to pay ASTI trade union for the loss of income due to the memberships they've stolen from them. It provides training to shop stewards and other officials, and it promotes the cause of the trade union movement overall, being the overall body. So different ways to resolve disputes is a non-legislative method of solving conflict, and if you can do it that way, that is the best way. And every union tries this matter. So you negotiate. This is trying to reach a mutual acceptable agreement. So teachers at the moment tried this. They met with government. They've asked to meet with the HSPC, which is the health advisors, about COVID, about the advice around schools, and they've refused to meet with them. And they can't explain why schools are the only place that don't have 2 metre social distancing, and just the return to school safety measures. So through long negotiations, we've got nowhere, and we can't meet with the health advisors. So we've been left with no choice but then to ballot. Another thing is the employer may be represented by management and the employee by the shop steward if it's an individual case. This is a non-legislative method. You go into a meeting, you chat about it. The management will talk on the employer's point of view, and the shop steward will talk from the employees, and they'll try to come to a mutually agreed solution. When both sides agree, it's known as a collective agreement. However, it won't always happen that you can sort it out yourself. Conciliation, if you look at this word and see it like counselling, conciliation, it's like a counselling service for employees and employers to come together. Since 2 parties in a dispute ask an independent outsider called a conciliator to help solve the problem. The conciliator will bring 2 sides together to get them to find a mutually acceptable solution. She does not tell them what to do. She just gives advice, or she gets them there. How could you fix this? A bit like you see restorative practice in a school. What went wrong? How can we fix this? How can we move forward? And she gets the 2 parties in a good place, moving them on. Arbitration, on the other hand. This is where the employer and the employee ask for an independent third party called an arbitrator to investigate the dispute and make a ruling. Like, tell us what you think happened here and what should happen. The arbitrator listens to both sides of the argument and tells them what to do. If they agree to accept the arbitrator's ruling in advance, it's known as binding arbitration. So before you go in there, you say, we will accept this independent advice and we will follow it. That's called binding arbitration. So it's ideal if workplaces get on. But basically, you have 2 things. You have bosses who need to make a profit and workers who need to make a good wage, and they come into conflict. But it's in their interest to get at a mutually agreed place because people suffer. Who suffers? The firm loss of orders and profits if you're out on strike or if there's bad industrial relations going on. The employees have a loss of wage and job security. They don't know where they stand, and sometimes they can punish them with firing and sacking, which the union will have to fight further. But they really feel on shaky ground when there's bad industrial relations. Customers may not receive their goods or supplies due to the strike and the orders not being met. The public loss of important services. The government may lose their tax revenue because if people are out of work, they're down wages, so the tax on that wage is down. If goods aren't being produced and delivered, the sales, there's a loss of tax on the sales, so there's revenue lost. The country, bad industrial relations may discourage investment in countries. If there's really unstable general strikes, then people feel that people will think twice about investing in that country. Legislation and industrial relations. These are the 3 main acts we will examine in relation to industrial relations. The Unfair Dismissals Act 1977 to 93, the Employment Equality Act 1998, and the Industrial Relations Act 1990. And we will go into these into detail on the next video.